guys, to another episode of the Evolution Podcast. Today, I have a special guest. We're going to be discussing things about music, and also, if you are a fan of the '90s movies, like Predator or any of the fun movies that are out there, and you're like, hey, you know what? Is there a show that's out there that's actually doing reviews and actually talking about it? Then you're gonna want to listen to the guest that I have on, and I have Steve here, who's going to be introducing himself shortly. Steve, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi there, thanks for having me on. My name is Steve Epley, and I'm the co-host of Cinema Decon, the host of Music Rewind, and creator of the Siderial Media Group.
Awesome. So what is the Siderial Media Group?
The Siderial Media Group is something that kind of came out of COVID, which many podcast and media groups tend to do these days. A group of people, like-minded individuals that had lingering skills of talking.
Okay.
Talking always kind of number one there, but editing, marketing, social media, copywriting, we all kind of just came together and started creating just to see what we could do. And out of nowhere, people liked it. So we decided to name it the Siderial Media Group. And so far it's been a fun journey, and hopefully it continues on for a while.
Well, so what are the kind of topics you guys talk about?
The main two things are the music and movies, right?
Okay.
That's the first thing that came out of it was Cinema Decon, which is between me and my friend Aaron, and also my friend Bud, who has taken on the role of producer in that particular podcast. And it started out, as I said, in COVID, where everyone was just in the background. What do we do? Lockdown. Not really social anymore. So we started taking advantage of the resources that we had online and started recording our conversations, talking about the movies we love, the same conversations that myself and these individuals had for years past, and somehow made a good show out of it.
Gotcha. So what did you do prior to starting the show?
Well, me and my other friends that actually started the first podcast, we've been working together in the technology industry for years, literally been in bunkers together overseas, spent time in Iraq and Afghanistan with all these individuals. And we have a tight relationship, and we have the same views for the most part on a lot of pop culture. And it was just a lot of fun. We never really thought that we would make money doing this or that it would turn into something bigger. That's just kind of been a bonus. But overall, it's just a lot of fun to do this with like-minded individuals. And utilize their skills that they didn't realize they had.
Got you. Well, first off, I want to say thank you for your service. But this is a segment that I'm starting to bring in. So I have a lot of friends who are in the Guard. And basically in the Guard, or either they're active and they come back home for a few weeks or a month and then they go back, and they always tell me the war stories, stuff that happens over there. So I don't know if you have anything that's not classified that you want to share.
Well, I joined the Army at 18, so
okay,
I was right there straight out of high school in '98, and I did in total about 9.5 years. Did some time on out in Hawaii at first, and then after active duty, I actually joined the Illinois National Guard. So I did active duty and the Guard. But it was with the National Guard that I got called up to go to Iraq. Gotcha. And fascinating year. Year and a half, more or less. But the best thing to come out of it for me was the personal relationships. I still keep in contact with all of those soldiers today. Some of them are still some of my best friends, but also the civilians that I worked with. I was in technology, so I was there providing the network for the Baghdad area for that year. My teams were surrounding Baghdad in different types of technology and giving the internet to the soldiers that needed it. Side by side with us were contractors. So every day I would report to my area and sit down next to a guy who was making 4 times what I was making. But I had 10 times the responsibility with soldiers and other sites, and struck up a great friendship with him. And now he's one of the editors of our podcast. So when I got out of the service, he is the one that brought me to Atlanta. He hired me, and I've been working with him ever since in various companies, various startups, travel overseas again as a contractor. He brought me into that world, and it's really been a great relationship, both social and professional.
Got you. So what was that transition like going from being in the service to, because a lot of people have that time where, you kind of go in for 9.5 years, you're in, and then you get into the civilian world. And then it's like this huge adaptation process where, it's like people it's like they interact differently.
That's true. And I kind of had two transitions because
Okay.
after my first 4 years, I got out and I was doing the National Guard thing, but I was going to, enter the civilian world. And this was 2002. And the Army will build you up to think that you are God's gift to technology in that field. And I had a very rude awakening with, I was one of many, go sit down. And this was in the Chicago area, outside Chicago. So there's plenty of young IT guys around. I got very lucky in landing a job as a network admin at a bank. And that was my real first civilian job. But then I got 2 call-ups, and that kind of changed my world. I got called up once to go work in DC at the Pentagon, and then a second call up to go to Iraq. And that was just an entirely different world at that point. Post 9/11, a lot was going on. College was never even in the mix, even though you kind of joined the Army to go to college. The college money, it just never even came up. There was no time. And then you're overseas for 1.5 years.
Mm.
But then at the end of that, this was OIF 3, Operation Iraqi Freedom 3. So it was a third rotation to touch down there. And by the time I left, it was OIF 5. Things were much more stable. So stop loss was lifted. I was able to leave service. I didn't really want to continue in the Army at that point. The cutthroat politics of that nature were not for me.
Mm.
But what helped my transition was actually becoming a contractor. So my first job in the second time I got out was traveling the country and overseas, teaching soldiers, Marines, and sailors on various forms of technology, networking, satellite technology, what I did in the military, just the next evolution. And I did that with, say, Bud, my co-host Aaron on Cinema Decon, and several guests on my podcast were also various co-workers or employees of mine. I spent a lot of time in Afghanistan as a contractor and just various places around the world. And that helped ease my transition because I was still in the world. And it wasn't until the end of that particular run that contractor run for me when I got out of the government game that my life changed and met the right girl, got married, kids happened all very fast after I left the government game.
Yeah, that's so you said government game. Okay.
The government game, yeah. Doing as a contractor, you're working for the Department of Defense, you're working for Department of State, you're working for a company, but that company has different contracts.
Gotcha.
So I would literally be in Baghdad training Marines for one company contract, and then that ends. Fly over to Bagram in Afghanistan. Now I'm training soldiers on a different company contract with because the technology is the same, the gear is just a different color, and it's you just contract to contract, which is a great way to gain experience and make a little money in your 20s.
Okay. So now, if you had to do it all over again, would you actually go back and do it all over again? Join the Army, join the Guard?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Now, would you join it as an enlisted, or would you kind of go in as an officer?
Oh, enlisted all day.
All day?
Absolutely.
Why is that? Okay, so yes. I've heard conflicting. Some guys like, yeah, as an officer you get an easy life. As an enlisted, you kind of got to take orders from 20-some-year-olds just came out. So what's your take on? What's your take?
Oh man, that's a loaded question. Because we all know the best life in the military is warrant officer.
Uh-huh.
Had I stayed in, I would have gone the warrant officer route. That would have been my path. I had my packet ready to go to walk school, and it was that would have been the path. But I just didn't want to. I
Yeah.
was burnt out on it all after that year and a half. But I always say the best decision I ever made was getting in the military, and the second best decision I ever made was getting out of the military. Everything happened for a reason at the right time.
Yeah.
The call up, everything, even even my last year as a contractor was beneficial to me because that was when I started dating at the time my girlfriend, then fiance, then wife. But because I was stuck in Iraq on a contract that was 30 days, it was a 30-day contract, turned into 60, turned into 90, turned into 9 months.
Wow, you just kept getting extended.
And because that was, say, the government game. I had to. And it's not like working a job here where you can just walk off. I'm tired of this. I'm going to walk off and go get another job. If I were to leave, I am leaving people hanging over there, relying on the network that I was supporting. So, it all worked out for me personally, because during that time I was able to correspond with my wife and, just really get to know her even better. Just the daily email, old school style.
Yeah. What year was this? This is what, mid to 2000s?
No, the end. This would have been 2009, 2010.
Wow. Okay. So, but that was MySpace days.
After MySpace, more Facebook.
Okay.
But it was when Skype was coming online. So,
yes.
And the company that I was, this particular contract was a Department of State contract, and I was setting up communication for medical clinics throughout Iraq. And so I was bouncing from site to site, from the south all the way to the north of Iraq, and setting up these clinics. And part of it was testing communication. So I'd be typing out her Skype, and that was my test. It was, one of the benefits of dating a comms guy is you get to talk to him, and the internet's free.
Interesting. So in this instance, were you like tapping into satellites at that time, or was it like
this was all satellite comms. So we would have to build the dish, point it, peek it on, get the right signal, and then test all the inside gear, the network, the phones, all that stuff.
That's cool. So you guys were what, long distance for how long?
About a year. Yeah.
Okay. So.
But I mean, with a few small trips, where I was able to come home for a week, but I had to go back.
Yeah, but then again, obviously, what's out there where a lot of guys are like, man, I can't do a long distance relationship, or most long distance relationships don't work. And you guys actually got married even after being along. So what was the secret?
Well, the secret was we went in not intending to date. We were both exiting previous relationships, and we're like, you know what? We're gonna approach this as friends, and we were just gonna talk, and we did, and that talk grew very quickly, but it definitely grew into something very strong.
Gotcha. So what advice would you give to him? Because obviously, dating in 2008, 2009 and dating in 2020, 2023 is
I've got little brothers that are 10 and 13 years younger than me in the dating game, and I wouldn't even know where to begin these days. Everything changes so fast that that's a crazy world right now.
So what's the biggest change? Obviously, if you can put it in context, we don't piss off a specific mafia kind of thing. But what is the if you could put it in, what's the significant change that you've seen? You said you've seen since 2000, because it's been what, 13 years now? Well, 15 years from 2008 to 2013.
Well, I would say now you've got the Tinder world, right? I mean, now it's just immediate looks, swipe. That wasn't my world at the time. It's just completely different now with it's actually quite a fascinating thing that I was talking with several colleagues about, how pop culture and everything has pretty much been frozen due to the advent of social media and the widespread internet, right? So since the early 2000s, everything has been kind of stagnant on a social level. People aren't
Okay.
leaving as much. They have what they need online, and that's not 100%. That's just kind of a general aspect. Uh, but when you go back and look at, Happy Days was in the 70s, spoof in the 50s. The Wonder Years was in the 80s, spoof in the 60s. That 70s show was in the 90s, spoof in the 70s. So you've got that 20-year, almost 30-year at times gap. But today, you get a group of people just standing out on the road. They are dressed the same as they are dressed in the early 2000s. The
Mm-hmm.
styles of general stuff has relatively stayed the same. The dialect has stayed the same. The conversations have kind of stayed the same. So the only thing that's really changed has been the internet
Okay.
access.
Okay.
2000s was when broadband came in, and the internet started being in every household. And I'm not trying to knock that, because that's my day job as a network engineer. It's what I do. But it's amazing the sociological aspect that it has on people, and how people socialize, how they connect to other people, and how much they see. I mean, you're not really meeting people that say, yeah, I met so and so out at the club, out at the bar, or out at the coffee shop. That's those situations are being more rare.
Okay. Okay, that's interesting. Now, I mean, if I'm looking at it right now, and I look at, and I tell people, I know this is not really a dating, we're not doing dating podcast, but we got to have a lot of men to watch this. So, and this is an interesting thing. And I always kind of like to reference. So I'll give like a story on Tinder. So this was probably a year and a half or 2 years ago. I was waiting for a flight. And at the airport, there was a lounge where it was like a coffee lounge. So I was sitting there, and then there were two girls there. So they came and sat next to me, and then we started a conversation. So for some reason, I have a funny way of it's people call this basically therapy, right? They're like, Emmanuel, you have a way people start telling you about your personal life and stuff. So they start telling me about their dating life, right? And they're like, it's tough out here to meet someone. I'm like, so you guys are what? How old are you? They're like, one is 18, the other one was 21. And I'm like, have you guys probably used Tinder? And they're like, yeah, but I don't really care about any of the guys there. So I was like, okay, well, I'm pretty sure like you get a lot of swipes. They go, and I remember this vividly. One of the girls she said, well, I use Tinder as a shopping cart. So I get as much matches as I can. I make sure I rack up my numbers. And if I feel lonely, I talk to guys on Hinge. And then whenever I want to check out, I go to Tinder and I check out. And then the other girl said, I use Tinder only when I feel down and depressed. I download the app, and then I get all these guys tell me I'm beautiful and I look good, and then when I'm done, I delete the app, and so I'm hearing this in my mind. I'm like, dude, someone needs to record this. Somebody needs to like. But then again, I'm pretty sure most guys know this, but.
Well, I'd be fascinated by the male point of view of an 18 and a 21-year-old.
But the thing is this, the male, I mean, what statistics are like what? 1/3 of men between the ages of 18 and 30 are virgins. But most men don't ever go to I don't think I met an 18-year-old guy that goes, well, I go on dating sites as a shopping cart to get as many women as I like to talk to me, and then I talk to them on Hinge and then whatever. But then again, it's just based off the fact that two different perspectives on the dating scene, right?
It is. It's fascinating.
Yeah, but what's interesting is, go ahead if you.
Well, one, I don't even know what Hinge is, so I'm proud to say I don't know what that is.
That's awesome. No, but it's a very fascinating topic, and I know we're gonna actually get into the question here. So, the other day I was talking to this acquaintance of mine. She's more of a friend now, and she was talking about. She said, "Guys don't approach me." Okay, she was a decently attractive woman. She goes, "Guys don't approach me," and I'm like, "Okay, well, I'm like, you giving up a mean face?" He's like, "Yeah, you know." She goes, "No." I'm like, "I'm nice. I smile, but no one ever comes talk to me." And I was like, okay, well, let's look at the statistics, right? If a guy comes talk to you, I asked her, I said, what's your preference? She goes, oh, I would like a guy who's at least 5'9", 6 feet and above. I was like, okay, well, what is he? What would? So then I said, okay, so what is the the stats data on the average height in America, I think was 5'7", 5'8". So technically, which means the average guys don't hit your quota. She goes, no, well, you know what? I'll actually accept 5'8". I'll accept 5'7". I was like, okay, that's fine. I was like, I know you won't, but we'll say that you will. And then so I was like, what do you want? What exactly? She goes, I just don't want him to say anything stupid. I want him to come to me and say something proper. And I was like, okay, so what is proper? She goes, well, it all depends. So now I'm like, okay, now I'm confused, right? So I was like, okay, what about if he comes to approach you and then you don't like him and then you reject him? So she's like, well, I never actually thought about that. Then I was like, okay, that's what most men actually think about, actually getting rejected, right? Because most men are the fear of rejection. There's actually I actually covered this on one of the episodes. Most people would rather die than actually speak in front of strangers.
I can believe that. I can believe that.
Which is so weird. But then again, that was so I was like, if he's scared of rejection, he wouldn't come talk to you. So he would probably find a way to get you on Instagram or Facebook to talk to you.
Well, there's also there's the fear of rejection, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And from a guy of small stature, I'm only 5'6". I mean, I would be, I wouldn't even be considered by whoever that lady was.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's why I was, smiling and laughing at that point. But the fear of rejection was always there. And going through a guy's mind, what's the point? If I know that this woman is going to be, that kind of way to me, what's the point? I'm going to get rejected. I'm going to go have a beer with my friends. It's more fun than getting rejected.
Yeah.
But also in this day and age, you don't want to say hello the wrong way. There is a fear of, you walk up and I know it's way outdated, but if you go with the Joey Tribbiani way of, hey, how you doing?
Yeah. How you doing? How you doing?
All of a sudden you're brought up on charges. There is a fear of that in public with men, homely men. I'll put myself in that category. I hope my wife disagrees, but regular average guy that sees a woman, that fear is there. So they think, what's the point? I'm gonna go back to my video games. I'm gonna go back and watch TV because there's no rejection there, and I don't have to live in fear.
Yeah. And then which is also interesting from a statistics perspective, because I think still on the Tinder thing, which is interesting, is I think what was the number? I think only about 8% of men 8% of men get right swipes or something like that, or get dates on Tinder, which is like basically 92% or 93% of men are pretty much invincible, which is, I mean, I'd say fascinated on that note. But it's interesting. I was giving this advice to he's 17, he's going to be in college, and I told him, I said, hey, as a man, you got to build yourself up. You got to build yourself up to the point at which it doesn't matter how tall you are, it doesn't matter what it is, because most men, once you get to 28, 29, you're that guy. Let's say you've been in service, you come out, you're making a good, 6, 7 figure income, whatever, 5, 6, 7, whatever it is. Now you get to the point where you're actually attractive to most women, right? As opposed to that guy where you're 18 years old and you're like, oh my God, she didn't talk to me, she didn't text me back. But no, that's just interesting statistic.
And that would be my advice. You nailed it right there. I mean, if you're 18, if you don't have a high school sweetheart that you're, you deeply connected with, that is now your chance. That go and make yourself more interesting. Become that most interesting man in the world. Learn a trade. Learn multiple trades. Sure, there's school, but I am not the biggest advocate of college at all.
Why is that?
I didn't really learn much.
Yeah.
Other than deep economic theory and macro microeconomics of that nature and statistics, it was all rehash of what I had already learned in life. And that's with a master's degree. So all done years later. I went to college when I already with a wife and kids. But the people that I know that went to college right out of high school, they will likely say similar thing, because it was too much party, too much extended high school, and not enough actual learning of a trade. You're just relearning what you learned your senior and junior year of high school. And that's That's my opinion. I'm sure there's plenty others. I would much rather see people go into get an apprenticeship somewhere, join whatever the craftsman's trades are, join the military and learn something,
Mm,
create something of yourself, and not just sit there in a lecture and listen to old people.
mm,
And not only that, when you're actively doing something, you're offline. You
mm,
are learning to do. Now, if you're, and I'm not trying to knock my trade, because as a network engineer, I helped learn to build the networks that the internet runs on.
mm,
But many people don't know about it. That is a very detailed trade in itself. The configuration of routers, switches, firewalls, that nature. I've always loved building networks. It's just something that kind of I fell into. And
mm,
but for those guys out there that have that that want to make themselves more attractive to a woman, become that most interesting man, be able to have an interesting story to relate to them, travel, go to festivals, go
mm.
do things that are fun for you. And then that builds your character and your experience that you can then share later on with the right girl, not just some girl on an app.
No, I love it. I love it. And which is also interesting. And I want to get your take on this. If you could summarize one lesson you got from being in service that still sticks with you to this day, what would it be?
Hmm. Uh, that's an excellent question. I had a chief that just always said his phrase was, "Nothing is easy, and everything takes longer than it should."
Mm,
And that, unfortunately, is a lesson that just transfers straight over into the corporate world, and it just lets you know that there's BS everywhere, right?
hmm
There is no perfect job, in that there's not going to be challenges and BS to deal with in a daily basis.
mm,
You have to tackle it head on and accept that some things will take longer. It's
yeah.
not going to be an easy fix. Do it the right way, and otherwise you're going to do it again.
Mm.
So, but that aside, I think the biggest takeaway that I had in the military was never make more work for your boss.
How so? What do you mean? Expand on that.
That was something that I was told as a private by my boss at the time, but he was a very smart man. Uh, if you're doing what you're supposed to do, if you're on time, if you're paying attention to the details, the product you deliver will be what the boss wants.
Hmm
And if you are handling yourself, if you are taking care of yourself outside of work, you're paying your bills, you're not mistreating people, you're not getting in trouble with the law. And granted, this is from a military perspective, privates, sergeants,
Yeah.
there's a reason for these types of safety briefs.
Uh-huh.
But that has stuck with me till this day. And being in leadership at a company now, not the purpose of this podcast, but that's always stuck with me, that I do not want to be the one to make more work for my boss. And by doing
Mm,
that, you will stand out as a top provider.
yeah. So now, which is interesting, you said that, because if I'm rephrasing what you said, is the first statement you made was basically talking about how pretty much life was not going to be easy, but if to make it more real world applicable means just show up, be consistent, and just don't give up, right?
And don't
Because
don't underestimate anything. So
okay,
the most routine task, oh, this should be easy. No,
mm,
nothing is easy, and everything takes longer than it should.
give me a
So
sec. Can you expand a little bit more on underestimate? Because then again, I think a lot of things
so
we do in life. Yeah.
all right, in the build up to Iraq, we're down at Fort Stewart, Georgia, and uh, the way our systems worked was we had Humvees with communication shelters on the back, and each of those trucks had switches, routers, satellite gear, that sort of thing, things to communicate, connect up, and provide internet to the officers. And uh, all that stuff needs fuel, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we have generators. Generators are powered by diesel fuel. it's pretty well known how much fuel a signal communications company of that nature needed at the time. So when we get to Fort Stewart, Georgia, to do the train up for Iraq, uh, something as easy as going to the logistics shop and requesting the fuel became one of the most difficult things of my entire career.
Okay.
To the point where we had to tell them, okay, no more internet for you.
Really?
You're not giving us fuel, so we're not giving you internet. And that wasn't a threat. We had to just kind of let things die. They didn't believe us. You don't need fuel. How many fuel cans you need? No. I need that fuel truck that's sitting over there. If you want to survive the exercise and have internet this entire time to submit your officer reports and do those things, you need internet. In order to provide said internet, that needs fuel, logistics. Give me my fuel. They said no. So something as simple as putting fuel in trucks or putting fuel in generators took much longer than it needed to. It was extremely difficult. People got fired from positions. It was ugly. It was so unnecessary.
Really?
And well, that, remember I mentioned before, the cutthroat politics of the National Guard was not something that I was too keen on.
Interesting.
It
I mean,
was pretty ugly.
but the thing is this, wouldn't you say in my personal experience, wouldn't you say that there's politics in every realm of,
Oh,
in
yes.
armed service, even in business? Like, for instance, I have a meeting in about 3 hours, and we're going to be negotiating pretty much a very pivotal deal in our business. And there's also the part where you're going to have to play politics, right? Because people kind of want you to sugarcoat and like, okay, what's in it for me?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's kind of like you gotta have that. So, I mean, knowing now what you know, wouldn't you say like, hey, politics is part of anything?
Absolutely. I think what turned me off to it though was the cutthroat nature of it. I'm all for politics, getting things done. I mean, hell, sometimes just to get water in Iraq, you had to pay the local tariffs, as it will. But with the state National Guard getting into the higher ranks of E7 and above, it's where in order to get promoted, someone needs to literally die or retire.
Okay.
There's not enough slots. I mean, it's not like a corporation where there can be reorgs, there can be expansions, acquisitions. No, a military unit is a military unit. Active duty, you could always, you want that next rank. Well, there's a slot open in Omaha. There's a slot open in Georgia. There's things you can do. But if you're at a state level, that's a hard ceiling there. So there are things to do to torpedo other people performance wise to make sure you are at the top of that list instead of other people. And as I got higher in the ranks and I witnessed this firsthand, it was just like, this is just not me. Now that's the higher enlisted and officers. I've said this many times to other people as far as my deployment overseas and putting my life in other people's hands. Those lower ranking soldiers, lower enlisted I served with, amazing. And I will trade in every active duty soldier I've met and go back over there with those college students from Northern Illinois that wanted nothing to do but their job and then go to sleep. They were amazing.
But the politics side of things is
the politics got very ugly for no reason at all, with like zero outcome of positive outcome. It was just pointless.
But what's interesting is you say that, which kind of makes me just realize this is, like, I'll give you a scenario, right? When there's a reason behind everything we want, right? Let's say you buy a Lamborghini, right? You don't seem like a Lamborghini. I don't think you care much for a Lamborghini, right? But let's say you buy a Lamborghini, or someone buys it. Let's say you live in Miami and you buy a Lamborghini. Okay, so now we've changed the scenario now, right? You're a single guy, but no, you're married, but you're a single guy in Miami.
My wife would kill me if I looked twice at a Lamborghini. Yeah.
But let's say you buy the Lamborghini in Miami. Now, one of the key reasons why you would do that is most people are like, well, I like the car, but necessarily, luxury cars aren't known for reliability. They break down a lot, right?
It's a status thing. Yeah.
It's a status thing, right? And looking at it from the political perspective of going high and rising up the ranks, E7, high, ranks above, it's a power thing, right? Because then again, I mean, if you look at it, I mean, as far as disparity, was it a difference in income?
That's a good question. Active duty, yes, there's a big spread of income, but National
Okay.
Guard, that's not their day job. So they're not really caring about that. What they're caring about is the rank and the longevity of staying in those ranks or moving up. So
Okay.
say the National Guard politics is completely different than the active duty politics.
Okay.
I mean, I've seen lieutenants and lower enlisted come to blows active duty over pay inequality. So that's another weird conversation. But the way it always seemed odd to me is that the best way to shine a light on yourself is to properly do the job to an excellent level.
Mm.
But with some people, they would rather cut those corners, make sure the job gets done, and then just put their name on top without even any care of how the job got done or to what quality. That happens a lot. Rather than just doing the job and letting the work speak for itself, and to those higher officers, letting your unit speak for itself, because that's what they don't realize, that if your unit does good, you do good as their leader. And that's where they failed, in my opinion, from a personal level. I mean, they were more concerned about padding their bullet point slides for the general than promoting the E1s and E2s that were there for 6, 9, 12 months and were not promoted. That's denying them money that they deserve. I mean, those are automatic time promotions, but the commanders and such have to put in the paperwork to do it. But they were more concerned about politics instead. Whereas as a sergeant, our job number one is taking care of soldiers. That you're told that from day one of your leadership school. Take care of your soldiers. Officers have sometimes a different mentality.
Gotcha. No, that's very interesting there with the political side of things. So, just talking about leadership here from the leadership perspective, if you have to summarize the three qualities that makes a good leader, like someone's watching this right now and you're like, you know what, you made some good points. Now, maybe they're a C-suite exec, or, they're running, a mom and pop shop, or they're just a small business owner, or they're an entrepreneur. And they're thinking of taking on their first hire or second hire. Because then again, I mean, how many people are under your unit? How many soldiers are under your unit?
Well, in a full company,
Yeah.
you're probably looking at around, I'd say 70 to 80 people.
Okay, so 70, 80 is not a small number, especially when you're responsible. If you get deployed.
Well, in a platoon, you're probably looking at around 30, and then a squad, you're looking at 5 to 10.
Okay.
So it breaks down depending on what level you're at.
Okay, so let's say we're looking at it from a perspective of a squad, right? Somebody's a business owner, but looking at it as a squad. It'd be a squad commander, right? I assume.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what would you say would be that leadership quality that you're looking that person needs to have to be able to lead, a squad of 5 or 7?
So the three things for me are pretty easy. Number one, you got to listen. Not just listening to the orders above you so that you know what to relay, but you need to listen to the soldiers below you, soldiers or employees. They have good ideas. They have insights that you may not have thought of, or they may have obstructions or problems outside of the scope that will impact whatever you're doing.
Okay.
So listening is key. Always number one. Number two, be the buffer. That joke from Godfather 2, the family's got a lot of buffers. It's 100% true, whether it's the military or the corporate world. You need to be the buffer of the BS up top. Let them do their job. Let the team do what they were hired to do and trained to do. And you, as the leader, you take on that higher stuff. Don't let it trickle down. Let them do their job. And number three, let them fail, which is the one I always have the most trouble with. Failure is the greatest teacher. It truly is. I have brought down networks. I have brought down global networks through mistakes. Fat finger something, or listen to the wrong person and input the wrong code. I have brought things down. I've learned from it. It's not really a rite of passage. It's just more of a, oh my, I am not doing that again.
Mm.
But too often, and say I am guilty of this myself, I will step in and stop the mistakes from happening. But sometimes you have to let the mistakes happen. Let them learn from it the way you did and the way your mentor did too.
Mm. Okay, so okay. So that I got the three qualities there. So now let's look at it from a perspective of, now we're pretty much on the leadership side of things. Okay, so we're now in a very sensitive world, right? That's the best way to put it in a very simplistic perspective, right? And part of I'd say leadership is giving constructive criticism, right? You'd agree,
It
right?
is. Yep.
So the other day I was watching a video of I'm pretty sure this video, I don't know if it went viral or not, but I was watching a video of a police officer who was trying to give a sobriety test to this lady. And I'm not gonna go into everything that she said she had, but she said she had everything on the book, basically all the cards, all the I can show it to you after the podcast. But
Oh, is
where
this
would
the
you
My Dad Owns the Island video?
no, 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 no.
Oh.
It was a lady that was saying she had trauma and she had all this
Oh, okay.
stuff.
I thought this was
Yeah.
a different one where the spoiled girl's like, my dad owns this island. Don't you know who
No,
I am? No.
I mean, I'm pretty sure that doesn't really work well. I mean, if you get stopped or get pulled over, like my dad owns the island. But there was a sense of, and he was like, "Hey, I'm just doing the test," and she was like, going at him and creating all this stuff. So, what would you say in a position if because now people are like walking on thin lines, right? You don't know what you might say to employee. Like you might be like, "Hey, listen, you did ABC, but honestly, I think you could improve it here by going DEF," and then they go, "Oh my God, this guy just hurt my feelings. Now I am triggered," and go on.
It is a touchy thing nowadays, and I've had problem employees at past positions, past companies, current company, just all of that. Even back to the Army, where uh, you have to protect yourself.
Hmm.
Third parties are your friends.
Okay.
Back when I went through sergeant school in the late '90s, they said right even way back then, if you are in your barracks room, say your soldier is a female and her room is trashed, that door needs to be open.
Mm.
Period. Do not go in that room, close the door, and then tell her to clean your room. No, keep the door open. Don't put yourself in a bad position.
Mm.
If you can, have a colleague with you, another sergeant to be a witness, just everything. Protect yourself while still providing the right motivation to your soldier.
Okay.
And that's the kind of advice that carries on to today. Today we have HR departments. We
Mm.
have I've had to situations where you're going to end up letting someone go. They're on a downhill track. They're not listening to anything, and they're even starting to be belligerent. You check with HR and you start blind copying HR on emails,
Mm.
so they see what you're saying, or CCing them, straight out, and letting that person know that, hey, there are multiple people on this conversation. There are ways to protect yourself, but whenever possible, have someone there with you, a witness.
Mm.
But change with the times too.
Okay.
You have to, use the right language that is approved for whatever company you're at. There's just, don't be stubborn and just say, "Oh no, I came up in the '90s. I talk this way." No, screw that. Change with the times, to the extent that it's logical.
Okay.
But above all, protect yourself. Don't put yourself in a bad position. All employees need constructive criticism. Even the most perfect employee you've got is still going to need advice now and then. And if it's even a remote chance that it could put someone in trouble, protect yourself the right way.
Mm. Yeah, interesting. Okay. All right. I mean, I've there's been a lot. This is basically takes from this, and I've got a few more questions to talk about, but because one of the questions I actually wanted to ask you, if you wanted to comment on it, was like, what do you think about the whole Israel Palestine things going on?
Oh wow. I don't. know if I'm qualified to even speak on that. I just know it's completely atrocious what I've seen.
Yeah.
And my personal stance is with Israel, but
Hmm.
that's my personal stance. I don't speak for any company or anything like that. That is me personally, and I think it's just absolutely atrocious. And I wish level heads across the globe would just talk more.
Yeah, I hope so too. So we don't, because I'm hoping we don't get into a World War III. Because I'm signed up for the draft. So, so, so I'm hoping we don't get to that position, because then that means I'm eligible to be drafted. So, but yeah, no, that's interesting. So, just talk a little bit about the podcast. So, you have both. So you have both the podcasts that you do, one with the music and one with also the movies, right? So,
Yes.
what talk a little, because you spoke a little bit about what you discussed, the 90s movies, and you kind of, I actually
Mhm.
listened to a few episodes as well. Then
Did you?
I went on YouTube and I actually listened to a few of the episodes. So
Thank
what
you.
do you think? So what about the music? Like, what's the
So it's weird, the the casual movie one where we're just kind
hmm
of spitballing about the movie topic
hmm
of the episode. That one actually brings in more money
really?
just through fan donations than the music one, which is kind of my passion project. A bit more serious, but still a lot of fun. Where what I do is I invite people on to talk about their favorite album. What album is special to you that, for whatever reason, sticks with you? It's your go-to album, front to back, special to you. And it's on its third season. Third season's finishing up, and it's really a fascinating journey from people that listened to Van Halen at age 8 and it changed their world,
Mm,
or heard Eric Clapton as a teenager and made him want to be a blues guitarist. Uh, Even to one, which I think is one of your questions, but it's one of my favorite episodes, is with a friend of mine. He literally got divorced, and they didn't
mm,
really tell anybody. And this album was the soundtrack to his divorce. It was his therapy. It's what got him
interesting.
through it, and that's why that album is special to him. Alabama Shakes album, Sound and Color, and it's a very personal conversation. It was completely not what I was expecting, because this gentleman is an audio engineer on the hip hop scene in Atlanta, so I was expecting something along those lines. And then he brings this amazing album by the Alabama Shakes to the table, and here we are going track by track talking about his uh, journey after his divorce. It's
Mm,
fascinating and very personal to me.
interesting. So you mentioned something which is interesting there, and I had another podcast with he's very very much into the music scene, country music. And we spoke about AI, and we spoke in the senses too, because I told him, I was like, hey, listen, we have one of the things is I actually teach, there's a business, there's a course we're setting up, and then we've had a few clients in them where I teach how to basically clone and make an AI avatar of yourself and basically use that for your internet content, right? And it's super realistic in the sense to your voice, the body movement, the whole insane thing. Now, what's interesting is even in the music scene, you have AI generated music that sounds exactly like human, so human like you can't even tell the difference. So what do you think is going to be the implications in the next 5-10 years for artists? Because you see the Hollywood strike where writers are like, hey, AI is taking our jobs. Do you think that's going to happen to musicians?
Uh, Another good question. Another good question.
I'm
Yeah,
trying, man. I'm trying. Thank you.
I have my own personal thoughts on AI. As a network engineer
Okay.
and just automation in general, and it varies from field to field, because in the technology world, my world, you you don't automate just to automate. There has to be a reason. There has to be a value. Is it saving you work in the long run by automating something? Whereas in the entertainment industry, you are looking at the possibility of replacing, you know, actual talent, uh, whether it's someone that's using AI for copywriting,
Hmm.
or as you said with music. And I've heard, I think it was the other day, someone sent me the Beach Boys singing Nine Inch Nails, and it was spot on, perfect as the Beach Boys. It's like,
Wow.
that's creepy and entertaining at the same time. And I don't really have a forecast of which way that's going to go. I'd want to say, oh, it's going to be crap because you can tell the difference, but sometimes you can't, and it's only getting better.
Mm,
And one thought though is that maybe that's a good thing. Maybe that's what the industry needs. Me personally, I have not been a fan of the music scene the past, I'd say, 10 years. One of the reasons I started this podcast was for me to rediscover old albums that I had missed.
mm,
You know, and that's been 100% true, from Band on the Run to Quadrophenia to Sound and Color. You know, so many great albums that I just never gave a second thought to listen to all the way through. And doing it through these people's point of view, it adds a level of enjoyment to me. Now, if it was like a entirely AI generated album, man, I just don't know how it. There's the quality that it's going to have to not hit. I mean, voices are one thing, instruments are another. You can't
mm.
duplicate Eddie Van Halen with
True.
AI. You just you can't duplicate Keith Moon. You know, there's a certain level of talent with these instruments that, to me, I don't think it's going to be able to be duplicated by AI. Voices, different story. Voices, I mean, hell, auto-tune's been doing it for years, which is one
Mm-hmm.
of my issues with the music industry. But instruments, different story. There's talent. I mean, could you picture, you know, Ray Charles or Billy Joel being simulated with AI? I just think there's a talent there to play those instruments that couldn't be matched.
But what's interesting, you said, which is interesting, you saying this is, I mean, at the end of the day, right? You have the artist, they get signed to a record label, right? The record label helps through the promotions and everything, right? They get paid a percentage and then they get paid royalties from the songs and all that. But if you're looking at it from a record label perspective, if you're like, hey, maybe I may not be able to, you know, duplicate this artist, but I can get close enough, which means I don't have to pay him anything. I don't have to deal with the royalties for that. And I can literally go from keeping 40% to now keeping 95% and just pay the AI guy that just set up the AI. Because then again, it's like it still boils down to one thing, the P word, profits. Right. And record
Yeah.
labels are basically, it's a business. And you said, I mean, if you don't mind sharing, in the past, you said over the past 10 years, there's been, you know, you're not a fan of how the music industry is trending. Why is that?
The music just doesn't sound good to me anymore. I am a rock guy at heart,
Okay.
classic rock. So that era seems to be fading. You know, you have the Foo Fighters and a few others keeping it alive, but that general music is kind of going to the wayside. And you have, you know, the mumble rap or screamo or EDM, and just these sounds that, to me, there's no rhythm to it. There's no flow. There was a meme I saw the other day where it was a guy comparing the 90s hip hop to today's hip hop, and it was just night and day, how good it sounded to today's stuff. And it was just, and that's not me trying to be, you know, old man, get off my lawn. It's just a personal preference of the sound is just drastically different, and I don't really care for the way it's evolved. And maybe AI can help, you know, swing that back and provide more rhythm. But the music industry's changed too.
Okay.
You mentioned the record labels and that nature. People aren't buying that way anymore. They're not
Mm.
really buying albums, you know, other than maybe Taylor Swift.
Sure, she's still selling out. Yeah.
when you have all 10 of the top 10 singles, that's pretty amazing.
When
Uh,
she can raise the ticket price on an NFL game by 43%.
right?
so, so then you know that's the real power of influence right there.
I mean, my wife and daughter have tickets to go see a concert of hers in a theater. So, I mean, that's
Yeah.
she's found a sweet spot there. But I mean, I've interviewed a ton of musicians on my show that love coming on Music Rewind to talk about the album that inspired them, and then they talk about their indie music on the back end, and it's all Bandcamp.
Okay.
Bandcamp. If anyone's listening to this, support your favorite bands on Bandcamp, because Bandcamp gives the most back to the artist. And I believe on Fridays, they give 100% back to the artist. So if you download an album on Friday, it all goes to the artist. You buy it through iTunes or Spotify or wherever, those artists are getting a fraction.
Mm,
and there's some really, really good indie music out there. It's the
gotcha.
mainstream. Oh man, I said the M word. Yeah. Just
You
trying
said
not to.
you said
It's
that. I
the
mean, yeah.
I mean, whether it's, I mean, I'm not the biggest Taylor Swift fan, and
Yeah.
but I mean, Post Malone and those others. It just doesn't really get into my head enough to where I'm like, wow, this is amazing music. But
Yeah.
some of the indie artists that I've interviewed, Julian's and Bryce Evans, Emily, NYC. There's some really and most recently Connor Sherland. He has a new album coming out at the end of this month. They're all doing their own thing with such different vibes and different creativity, but struggling to hit that mainstream. So support them, where you can.
Absolutely agree. Absolutely agree there. So that's interesting. So as we wrap up here, where can people find you?
So siderialmediagroup.com is a pretty basic site. It pretty much links to both cinemadecon.com and musicrewindpodcast.com. But the podcasts themselves are all over the basic podcast platforms, your Apple, your Spotify, and they're up on YouTube. YouTube, we get kind of creative and just kind of put little things out there, little clips of musicians or movies, little clips that are enjoyable to us. We have a lot of fun with it. Recently, I've been doing this treasure hunt through a box of old mix CDs that we found, and that's pretty fascinating.
Okay.
Mix CDs from the early 2000s of what in the world were you thinking at the time that you thought this was going to be a good CD?
No, no, no. Okay. Interesting. All right.
So a lot of fun, and obviously Twitter, X, Instagram, we're on there.
Okay, perfect. All right, guys, the links are going to be in the description, so definitely go check them out, show some love, and obviously, it's absolutely awesome having you on. And any last words?
No, I just appreciate you having me on. Good luck with the show, and I love your back catalog.
Thank you. Awesome. Okay, guys, you guys have a good one. Then again, guys, check out the links and don't forget to like and subscribe.